Whistleblower David Grusch testified before Congress that the United States has alien bodies and alien vehicles in our possession. Watch.
Intelligent extraterrestrials.
Something I can't discuss in public setting.
Okay, I can't ask when you think this occurred. If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
And was this documentary evidence, this video, photos, eyewitness? Like, how would that be determined?
The specific documentation I would have to talk to you in a skiff about.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, so, and you may or may not be able to answer my last question, and maybe we get into a skiff at the next hearing that we have, but who in the government, either what agency, sub-agency, what contractors, who should be called into the next hearing about UAPs, either in a public setting or even in a private setting? And you probably can't name names, but what agencies or organizations, contractors, et cetera, do we need to call in to get these questions answered, whether it's about funding, what programs are happening, and what's out there?
I can give you a specific cooperative and hostile witness list of specific individuals that were in those.
And how soon can we get that list?
I'm happy to provide that to you after the hearing.
Super, thank you, and I yield back.
Well, that was a little over a week ago. Congress appeared ready to spring into action to demand answers after what they heard behind closed doors, going into the skiff to get even more information about where these bodies are located, where these vehicles are located. But now there appears to be some pushback on Capitol Hill, even some undermining of Grusch's testimony, and even General Mark Milley coming out saying that he doesn't believe it, or at least he's not read into the program. I guess we'll get into that. We're in an interesting moment, and joining us now is renowned UFO researcher Dr. Michael Salla, and author of countless books on the subject. Dr. Salla, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Clayton.
So it appeared that things were moving full steam ahead, but someone or perhaps something isn't too happy about it. Who's pushing back on this disclosure program of alien bodies, vehicles, and these special access programs? What do you think is going on?
Well, Grusch's testimony was groundbreaking because never before has the US Congress heard anyone speaking with knowledge about classified reverse engineering programs that are based on retrieved extraterrestrial spacecraft or non-human craft and dead pilots. Previously, it was always about UAP or UFO sightings. So for the first time, Congress got to hear this and got to admit it into the official record. And there has been pushback, immediate pushback. Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, who is the head of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, he is ostensibly the person who should be revealing this sort of material because he's the one that's officially in charge of looking at whistleblower testimony, examining records that are made available, and reporting to Congress about what he has learned. He was kind of blindsided by this, and he has come out and said that there's been no credible evidence that any of this is going on, which of course is contrary to what David Grusch was saying, because he said that he actually went to Kirkpatrick a year ago, presented his data, presented what he was told, and Kirkpatrick didn't act on it. So that right there tells you that I think Kirkpatrick is kind of like part of a cover-up there. He's part of the system. He's kind of like a gatekeeper put in that position to ensure that while the UAP material is ostensibly given some consideration, but all of the data, all of the information is steered in a direction which takes us down this path of UAPs being a national security threat. And, what does that mean? That's what Kirkpatrick wants to do. He just wants to allow material out there, evidence out there that supports that thesis, whereas Grusch was presenting a completely different line of investigation, which is that companies, contractors have some of these non-human technologies in their possession.
That's a fascinating moment. So now we have where I thought that this was going to go all along, which is that they're going to use this false flag event to push for disclosure so that they can increase the size of the military budget. They can talk about this threat of an alien invasion, lining us up for a fake alien invasion, when the underlying truth is there that, yes, we are using their technology, we have been for years, but the way to scare people now into allowing this budget to get even bigger is to make sure that this disclosure follows a certain line. Maybe that's why we saw General Mark Milley come out and sort of kind of step on David Grusch's testimony. And I don't know what to make of the Mark Milley side of this, but does that seem to be where we're going here? They're going to try to push for this idea of a fake alien invasion as some sort of a cover for disclosure?
Well, that seems to be where they're heading, because the UAP that have been cited and discussed in Congress and in reports have always done in the context of them being some unknown national security threat. And Milley is on board with that. He's saying, yes, the UAPs are real. They're a national security threat. We need to put attention on that. But he just says what Grusch had to say about them in some way being related to these retrieved non-human craft, and that people are being injured or have been killed for revealing the truth. Now, that is something that Milley has pushed back against. So, we do see clearly that there are people within the Pentagon, going all the way up to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, that want the public to think that UAPs are a threat, but that's it. They don't want them to go any further into looking at evidence that some of these are actually in the possession of government and being studied in various classified facilities.
Well, maybe, as you know, maybe he's not read into this program, and maybe it's above his pay grade, so to speak, and maybe he's not been in a need to know position after all. They want to allow certain U.S. presidents, or many U.S. presidents, to be read into these programs. It's kind of an amazing moment. Here he is admitting, chairman of the Joint Chiefs is admitting that yes, UAPs are real. Like, that's a pretty big admission. But then stopping short of saying that they've injured human beings, that they're being used for nefarious purposes in these special access programs, these black book off the record programs. Is it that perhaps he's not read into this? He's not a part of it?
Well, that's a very important point, because people make the assumption that the president, along with the Secretary of Defense and the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, that they meet in this kind of ready room in the White House when there's national security threats, and they make decisions about what to do. That's all predicated on the idea that these senior level officials have need to know access, and that's not always the case. I mean, the thing about General Mark Milley is that he, as in his capacity as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I mean, he's responsible for the administration and training and fundraising for the Pentagon. He's not in charge of combat capabilities or making command decisions about how to send out military forces to deal with issues. Those are the responsibilities of the 11 combatant commanders that the United States is divided. The planet is divided into 6 distinct geographical areas. Space is a 7th geographical area, anything above 60 miles. And then you have 4 functional areas like Special Operations Command, logistics, and so forth. So these are the people that are read in, because they're the ones that are responsible for commanding military forces in the field. So Milley may very well not be read in, because he doesn't need to know combat details about how to respond to potential UFOs, because that's not within his sphere of influence. He's responsible essentially for kind of like ensuring that the Pentagon has the training, has the money, and has kind of like good representation in Congress. So you've got to go to the 11 combatant commanders. And similarly with the President of the United States, he also wouldn't necessarily be read in. So, I mean, the kind of the stereotype that the big things happen in the White House ready room when decisions are made, that actually is false, because the senior officials that have access to that, they might not be read in, or those that are read in, they're the only ones left in the room if the room is cleared. And there are people that actually have described what happens in some of these, and maybe something like that happens where these senior officials like Milley attend, that at a certain point in an emergency, that a certain threat level is announced, and people that don't have need-to-know access have to leave that room. So people like Mark Milley may not be read in, just as you said.
Some of these members of Congress, of course, have now had private meetings with David Grusch, have gotten testimony directly in where these alien bodies are being kept, where these alien craft are being kept. You have Senator Mark Rubio now. Now it moves on to the Senate. So you have Senator Chuck Schumer and others who are pushing for more movement on the Senate side of things now that we're into this August season when no one's in Washington anymore, in the swamp. What do you think is going to happen now in the United States Senate side of this?
Well, it's already happened as far as the UAP Disclosure Act for 2023 is concerned. That was passed by the full Senate as an amendment and included in the National Defense Authorization Act for 2024. So right now, once the National Defense Authorization Act is passed in the Senate and also in the House, then there'll be a meeting between the House and the Senate to reconcile differences, so that the House is very likely going to adopt in full the UAP Disclosure Act. So it's going to move through eventually and become law. And this is where it becomes very, very interesting. It's because now you are going to have this body that is going to be set up in the National Archives, and that is going to be responsible for collecting all records concerning UFOs, and it's going to then release that within a 25-year period from the date that that record was created. So that means that things like what David Grusch was saying, he was saying that in 1944, 1945, that the US recovered the remains of a flying saucer crash that happened in Italy in 1933. And it's actually true that in 1945 you had something called Operation Lusty, which was something that the US military launched to go into defeated Axis power countries and retrieved any advanced technologies that had anything to do with aviation or aerospace and bring them to the United States. So what we are seeing in terms of what Grusch has revealed is that the records pertaining to that crash retrieval operation from Italy in 1933 were brought back into the United States. And this is a very interesting side note of history, is that at the time, John F. Kennedy, he was an assistant to the Secretary of the Navy, James Forrestal. And James Forrestal went over to Germany, went over to Berlin, and took with him John F. Kennedy to look at these craft, to look at what it was that Germany had developed and bring those back into the United States. So right there you have, that's where it began for John F. Kennedy in terms of his detailed knowledge into this field, because he was introduced to it through the Secretary of the Navy, James Forrestal. So all of these records that apparently are in the possession of the United States, that is going to be eventually released. And because those records date back to the 1940s, there's no reason why they couldn't be released very, very soon. So this is part of the ramifications of this UAP Act coming into law at the end of this year.
Well, I hope I'm not in my 70s before I start to see some of these documents. I'm 46 now. I hope I don't have to wait 25 years to get this stuff. I mean, it's the same way that Pfizer operates. We'll wait 75 years before we release the data on our COVID vaccines, and we have to wait 25 years to get this information. In the same way, we're still waiting for JFK assassination documents. So I hope that you're right about that. I hope that we can get some of these 1940s documents pretty quickly. So it moves through the Senate. On the markup side of things, once it comes over from the House of Representatives, they reconcile those differences. It goes to the White House for a signature from President Biden, and then it becomes law. And we could see a remarkable 2024 as it relates to disclosure, as long as we hope that this false flag event is brought into the light and people like you are able to share that so people don't fall for this phony story on the fake alien invasion side of things. Dr. Michael Salla, great to see you as always. Thank you so much for your perspective on this.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.